It's live. Hello.
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 Hello, hello, hello. So lovely to see you all. As I mentioned on a tweet earlier, even if no one arrives and asks questions, I get to talk to you three, which I would like to be able to do every day. So this works out really well. Maybe more people will see why I like to do that so much. But we're talking about the Causal Islands conference coming up a little over a month from now. Is that right? What's the first date?
April 25th to 27th in Toronto.
Yes, great. And I'll ask you to introduce yourselves, but we could maybe talk about what it is first, just so that we don't get lost and bore people too much with skipping the meat of the conversation. So I guess in 2018, Ben Schofield and I had an idea to run a conference on the future of software development. And I asked Blue Yard to help, where I now work full-time. And we put together a really inspiring, smallish conference, like Dunbar, small conference, bringing together a combination of academic people, practitioners, and a few investors, but not too many, people that we thought were like pushing the forefront of what was happening in software development, and also people who had set the sort of standards and created some of the innovations that we all rely on today. And I don't know how this came up. I guess it was in Paris last year, Boris. We were chatting about this. Basically, we always assumed we would keep doing these conferences because it was the best thing that we'd ever done. We went to Iceland. We thought that would be convenient because it's in the middle of Europe, and in the US, that was wrong. But it is better in the summer, by the way. So if you ever want to organize a conference in Iceland, just don't do it in winter. That's the problem. But then the pandemic happened and life got in the way and we didn't do another one. And so you sort of independently had this idea, right, at Fission. Maybe a little bit different. So you want to talk about where the idea came from, and then while you're doing that, maybe why is it called Causal Islands?
Sure. I'll start.
And who are you as you start?
I'm Boris Mann, CEO and co-founder of Fission, coming to you live from East Vancouver on Zoom, where we usually talk about things, or sorry, StreamYard. And what Fission is we do a lot of building of developer tools and protocols, many of them in the IPFS and Filecoin ecosystems. And Brooke and I have been thinking a lot about computing and distributed systems and encryption and how to make things easier for developers. And a lot of this stuff is things that we've been talking about, things that we've been building, and looking to find other people who are interested in this, and knowing that some of the stuff that we talked about, we might find a couple of people in a certain niche, but there was another really interesting niche in a language or an approach or academia or industry that probably was also filled with a really interesting people that people could learn from each other, but there wasn't necessarily a place to bring those folks together. And events like the side event that Blue Yard ran in Paris was also an example of oh man, we never get to talk to this group of people. Wouldn't it be great if we could put together a conference that brought people together, and that everybody actually had something to learn and everybody had something to share? And that was the base background.
Cool. And so, what is this Causal Islands reference from?
Brooke takes the blame for this one.
I started using the phrase a lot in presentations, talking about how speed of light being finite means that if you're continuously generating data, you'll never catch up to all of your all the other machines in a globally distributed, internet. The origin of the term, I've poked around trying to find did I invent the term? Did I read it somewhere? I thought maybe it was from Lamport. I can't find any references to the two words together in a Lamport publication, but it's definitely used in physics and mathematics. So maybe I ran into it at one point and thought, that's an interesting connection, and started using the phrase.
And I typed it into a domain search engine and went, causalislands.com is available. This is a wacky name. I should register it and make an entire conference around it. So the concept is that we're each on our own island of interests and information traveling along into the future together, and that very often we won't necessarily collide or get off of our islands. Back in the day, when I was building the Drupal open source content management system, we actually talked about getting off Drupal Island, meaning that instead of being highly focused in this verticalized framework of other things, that we should look what other like adjacent communities are doing. And that's the concept.
Nice. It's a good metaphor. I have a similar thing to you, Brooke, that I have this like story about marketing that I tell. I even wrote about it in my book. And I always say it's like referenced from something that I heard somewhere. And I've decided that I must have just dreamt it, because it's like, I know that I didn't just come up with it. It was given to me, but I think it was a dream. Here's the URL, by the way, causalislands.com. I got it right, didn't I? Good. So Zishan, Brooke, you are CTO of Fission. I don't know if we said that yet. So you're all members of the Fission team, except for me, regretfully. And Zishan, you are a member of Fission, sort of semi-recently joined the team. Yeah. And you may be known for something that sort of plays a similar role in the world as Causal Islands, right? You want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I'm a staff applied researcher at Fission now, but yeah, I mean, minus a lot of other things and all the other places I came from, one of the things that me and a few others created some years ago was a kind of Articles of Confederation like community called Papers We Love. Which I think I have one of the conference sweaters here, so prompted. But yeah, so Papers We Love has been a kind of a community of people, obviously getting in, bringing more of this, or trying to like engage with this bridge between academia and industry has always been kind of the goal with that community. And of course, we started the conference as well in 2016. That we've been kind of just backing with Strange Loop there, being co-located there with them, and have been all the way. And obviously, was not around during the COVID years, and came back this past year with our 5th conference. And so, I mean, in a lot of ways, Causal Islands shares some of the things. It's different too. I think, I think with Papers We Love, we've being a one-day conference so far, a lot of how we curate that is really a little bit geared toward people typically talking about a paper or a theme that has paper backgrounds, or maybe they were in industry and they really like this paper and tried to apply it. So it has a little bit more of that kind of thread that changes and morphs over time as well as we get to different kind of themes. And I think with Causal Islands, there is a tie, but I think it's somewhere an amalgamation of also like things that we've seen in conferences like Strange Loop, which bring people from all different backgrounds and ideas together. I think a big thing, I was one of the leads on the program committee for Causal Islands. And so, one of the big things we really wanted to do was, really go with that theme, right? People from all kinds of islands, all in one place. A lot of conferences tend to focus on a language or a specific, web or, back-end servers or networking. This kind of has it all, right? And that was kind of a big kind of goal for us.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of the islands. What are, like, if you had to list all the islands you're interested in representing, what would they be? How would you do it? Probably I'm asking you to like create a taxonomy that
I think, to be honest, there are still more islands. We can't cover them even in a couple days. That we have, but we have everything from like software security from Christina, who's at Oracle Research. We have some really cool like live coding, live performance stuff. We have indigenous computing, esoteric languages. And this on computing, we have how to learn how to program. I mean, it kind of hits I think everything from education. We even have, you brought up marketing. We have Michael Bernstein talking about the hardest problem in computer science, marketing. So, I think it really, it goes through a lot. Of course, Brooke is also giving a talk, and Quinn from Fission as well. on a lot of the stuff that we do, because we try to push the boundaries as well. So I do think there's kind of everything there, whether it's networking, distributed systems, languages, the human elements of large language models, stuff like that people are looking at, human-centric computing. I think they're all there, and obviously combined in some of the talks themselves.
Yeah, and really just thinking about, so, our top line saying is, I think you said, Chad, that your conference was like future of software development. And we thought, let's make it even broader. What's the future of computing? And I think, honestly, the timing is really interesting. So, we have one talk on sort of AI and LLMs by Maggie Appleton, who is an anthropologist and a designer developer. So it's not, it is going to be a bit of a different take and go in a different direction. And I think and then the flip side of that with distributed systems and novel hardware. I mean, I think we're in a time where, oh, look, this ARM stack is getting super interesting and it's cheaper and cooler. And oh, look, there's folks like Oxide Computer who are building their own computer/data centers. So, we think there's a lot of changes happening, that in fact, probably there's things happening on those islands that a bunch of people should be like, oh man, I haven't checked in Area X for a while. A bunch of things have accelerated. We should think about how some of these things interconnect.
Yeah, at the Future of Software Development conference, I think there were, to name two totally different sort of fields, there were people speaking about quantum computing, and then there were people talking about building a new distributed operating system, aka Web3 blockchain-y stuff, and it was just really interesting to see how, I don't want to say disconnected, but how not connected those two communities were and how fascinated they were. You could see people running to each other between the talks. So I'm guessing it's going to be very similar with these other islands, as you say. Go ahead, Brooke.
One of the things I always find really interesting is when you look over the history of computing, a lot of advancements happen when people start poking around not their field. And so it's always interesting getting experts from different fields to talk to each other. And so that's something that I'm really looking forward to, is getting this group of people together and just picking their brains for a couple of days.
Yeah, absolutely. Like what Boris was just talking about, hardware platforms changing, and to betray myself as a VC and use the word democratization, but there are things you can do now that wouldn't have been possible. Like as a hobbyist, you can do now that we wouldn't have dreamt of doing 10, 20 years ago on the hardware side, which, bespoke hardware, et cetera, really interesting kind of concepts to explore with people. I would feel completely out of my element trying to figure that out by myself at home, but to be able to just ask dumb questions in a safe environment with smart people who are experts is always a blessing. That's why we organize these things, right? I started RubyConf because I lived in Louisville, Kentucky, and nothing was happening. I wasn't the one person that started. We started, I should say, but the reason I got involved as one of the first organizers in 2001 was I wanted to be around all these super smart nerds that were doing this stuff that just had no business in suburban Louisville, Kentucky, which is all I had exposure to. So you can kind of see who are the dream people I wish I could just sit at lunch with and invite them to your conference, and that's sort of what's happening here, right?
Oh yeah, it's completely selfish. Completely selfish.
Of Strange Loop as well.
I don't know about for Strange Loop. Papers We Love, actually, in the Stack Overflow post that they had written. It was myself, Darren, and David, who were kind of the starters of it, and we talk about the same thing. We were working at a company all together, and we were bored of a lot of some of the apps and APIs we were writing, and we tried to get into papers, and then we just had a hard time getting into the papers. I think when we tried to read one of Tony Hoare's, I think axiomatic programming paper, we had a hard time with it because there was Greek math in it. We were like, it'd be great if, and I can call him out because he's a close friend. We were at that time it'd be great if David Nolan could explain this to us. because he'd been doing a lot of work with core logic and stuff in Clojure. This definitely dates myself, but that was a big, intention of it, when we started it out. And then we were like, well, why don't we just open this up to very much like a Boris Brook thing from Fission? Let's just make this open to the public instead of just, inside of our office, where the first, actually, the original Papers for Love was inside an office, but nobody, it was just the like 8 of us. But when we opened it up, and then we had, actually, kind of weirdly enough, Michael Bernstein, who went through the CFP for Causal Islands. I did not review it. Brooke and others in the committee reviewed it. He did it, anonymously. Michael Bernstein is the first Papers for Love speaker ever, and now he is back in this one. But he did give the first talk on the garbage collection paper by Bacon and Co. Back, I don't know how many years ago when we started in NYC. So, but anyway, yeah, it's a very similar story. Very selfish story. I want to learn, but my friends wanted to learn more, and we wanted someone to kind of guide us and help us. And I think at the end of the day, that's what you want from conferences, right? And Strange Loop, of course, is a conference that also did a lot of this for a lot of people, right? It brought up new ideas and engaged with people in a way that really they didn't know about it before. Those topics before.
Yeah, when Strange Loop started, I was in Berlin and couldn't make it over. So a friend and I started a group called Strange Group in Berlin that ran for a few years. It was the FOMO of Strange Loop, and we were able to get some people to join via video that weren't in Europe. Beautiful thing is sort of what you hinted at. Smart people doing innovative things usually like to share what they're doing because it's exciting, and they want to talk to people who are excited about the same stuff. Which means if you show up to a conference like this, you also should not feel weird about asking dumb questions, because people just want to talk about their stuff. They want to help, the kinds of speakers that are going to be at Causal Islands want to help the attendees understand the future and to brainstorm with them and to meet people.
Yeah, I think there's a piece here around, I won't even say that they've fallen out of favor, but I certainly will say that that concept of unconferences seems to be something that could do with re-explaining. Certainly the concept of saying that it's not a dynamic where there's a really smart speaker at the front of the room and then there's just people patiently waiting to learn, that there's lots of smart people in the audience too. So, we're going to still experiment with what it means to do some video streaming and bring people in remotely and ask questions and so on. But we also really wanted to make sure that we had a platform where people could talk about the thing that they really want to talk about and get a nice high quality capture. So ideally it spreads way beyond the bounds of whoever happens to see it live and synchronously. I think that's maybe a lesson that we've learned over some of the pandemic times. Certainly something that got caught home with me, actually, again, in Iceland. Juan Benet from Protocol Labs is always super insistent on, like, let's make sure we get really high quality video, because purely from a numbers perspective, thousands of more people are going to see it if we capture it and stick it around, kind of thing like that, right? And at the same time, making sure that you have the in-person stuff so that people can get that gel that happens in person.
All-way track.
Yeah. Honestly, one of the reasons I love video at conferences now is it means I can go to the one talk that really inspires me, which is usually not the one that I expect it's going to be, and then just sit like dumbfounded in the hallway track for the rest of the day talking about the topic that I was inspired by. We have a comment that for the speakers, it's probably a win-win too, right? Not selfish. And I agree with that. Having also been a speaker, Brooke, you can probably speak to this too, as someone who shows up at conferences and shares innovative ideas. I don't know if you want to talk at all about what you're going to speak about, but if not, you could either do that, or if you don't want to preview that, or maybe both, talk about what you're most excited, or who you're most excited to hear from, or at least one person you're excited to hear from at the conference that is a confirmed speaker.
Yeah, absolutely. So Maggie Appleton is does super impressive work. I met her last year and was just absolutely blown away. So super excited to see her give like a full presentation about the stuff she's working on. Really, not just like, I mean, obviously important that when somebody talks about something, it's like clear and sharp and sort of crystallized, and she does a great job of that too. But just like the long-term vision that she often talks about, it's not just like, hey, here's the, we're doing some stuff with machine learning models, and like that's kind of cool. It's like, no, like here's what this enables. This is what it actually gets people to do, right? Which is always exciting. What I'm talking about is how we can basically use content addressing and some more recent distributed systems research to let people run computation without having to care about where it's running, how it's running, or all of the really hard failure cases that happen with, as soon as you have a network in between. So this is something that Zishan and I talk about a lot recently, is this concept of virtual resiliency and effect systems and things like this. So instead of having to be, go and get fully educated in distributed systems, how we can take advantage of some recent advances to just abstract that away from developers completely.
And if you don't mind, one follow-up question on that, which is not at all about the conference, but just more about that topic. Why is now the time to talk about that? Why and to develop toward that?
Yeah, this is something people have been trying to do since like literally since the 70s. And just the state of computer science just wasn't there yet. And we've had some breakthroughs in the last 10 years. So we've had things like concepts like Merkleization and content addressing and content address storage and all this stuff for a really long time. But with cryptocurrencies and blockchains, there was a huge amount of investment in developing these concepts. And so we said, well, what if we could take a lot of these ideas and apply them to a non-blockchain context, or in a way that you could plug these things together. And so there's just been this confluence of different things that have kind of happened in parallel. So Merkleization, object capabilities, having encryption baked into browsers now, things like this that make it WebAssembly as more of a standard at the human level, where we're all agreeing that we're all going to run WASM, right? That make these things even possible, let alone the stuff just purely on the theory side. So it's still early days for all this stuff. Even WASM, which I think most people have heard of at this point, is like, it's still pretty early. The standards are still developing. The tooling's still relatively early. But if we don't invest in this picture of the future now, right, we're going to get stuck in the way things that have been, and we'll just replicate that picture ad nauseum. So this seems like the time to strike while the iron's hot.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. And this was an example of me being selfish. As I said, I just want to learn from the people on the call and also talk about the conference. Forrest says, I'll be remote. MozFest is all remote, and they're playing with spatial chat for hallway track things, which is a cool idea. We've talked about that a little bit, right? Is there some sort of a remote viewing kind of plan?
Yes, very loose right now, but basically we are going to make sure that people can interact, and we'll have a private chat with all the people who have tickets. We're both attending in person. So part of this is actually just going to be seeding a community as well that hopefully is excited to meet again in the future and in different venues. So you can attend remotely. We have a pay what you want ticket for that. So we do ask for people to register ahead of time. And then we'll make sure that everyone who is registered can participate directly. I don't know how fancy we'll get. We're probably going to use something like a Discord and do some streaming and make sure that all of the attendees who are there in person have access to all of that as well. I'd love to experiment with more of these things. This is V1, and we have all sorts of ideas of what we might do in the future. I'd love to work with people who maybe want to sponsor things that really play with what it means to be hybrid. And maybe that's a really good recognition, right? So we chose 150 people, not like 500. And that's you mentioned it before, Chad, the like Dunbar's number of like, like that's a decent amount of in-person people. We chose it in Toronto because it's mostly a single flight from lots of North American and Western European locations. We'd love to move it around. We'd love to play with like your whole Berlin thing. Is there remote viewing parties over time? If there are any sponsors out there that would like to do some sort of crazy thin screen video portal hybrid, call me.
I guess there's also nothing stopping someone from just deciding they're going to do a remote viewing party.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So if anyone's watching and is like wants to get together a small group of people, let us know. We'd happy to help like spread the word and help you, find other people in your region, basically.
Cool. So
yeah, and I'm guessing. Sorry, I was gonna say. I guess when someone mentions spatial chat, they mean like Gather. I'm looking at actually the MozFest one now, similar to Gather, seemingly with some more concepts built in because the whole thing is remote. I mean, it's an interesting thing. There's been some good talks, even at Strange Loop, I think in 2018, about the future of conferences, more geared because academia is going through a lot of this too with their conferences, because obviously some people can't even get to travel due to visas and things that occur. So the interesting thing is when you go all remote, you can go all in on a Gather or something more spatially involved. It's hard in the hybrid sense, right? I think we're still trying to figure that out, which I think, like, how do you make it where, because it's like, do the people who are in person interact with the people on the spatial chat, or do you just have two separate things? I still think there's a lot of interesting kind of pathways for that for conferences.
While you're speaking, and I just let you go on mute, but what would you say is something you're particularly interested in hearing, or someone you're interested in hearing from?
Wow, that's yeah. I mean, they're all really awesome. I think for me, in putting the conference together, I was really excited when we got both Ramsey Nasser and Jen Schiffer, who I've known from like kind of, when I got into tech many years ago. Jen's, I think, is going to be both hilarious and awesome and real, as she always is. And Ramsey, I've known for a lot of years from live coding. And when I went to NYU, he was involved at ITP, where I took a bunch of classes when I was doing my master's in music. And anyway, so I've known Ramsey for a long time, music and everything. And he, both those talks, actually, Jen and his, are actually talks that involve the future as part of their talk, I think, more than some of the other ones, where the other ones are talking about where we're going. They're actually like either looking back or looking ahead with some time allotment, and they're at least in their talk abstracts. So those two I'm particularly excited for, just because I've known their histories, and I'm really excited to get them to actually kind of involve themselves within that, because they have really cool, diverse backgrounds. So
cool. And Boris, what about you?
I'm just stoked that everyone's coming to visit us and has said yes, and that we're gathering either together, right? Like Zishan has done, and Brooke have done an amazing job of pulling together a really, really interesting set of speakers. It's covering a lot of different areas. I was really pleased to see that Jeffrey Litt, who we've hosted on some Vision Tech Talks and generally follow and enjoy the work that he does. He was posting about being excited. He's like, I like all of these talks and all of these speakers, and I'm super excited to hear from everyone. So that's something I'm really pleased about. I think we reached out and found some people kind of out of the woodwork in different interesting ways as well. There's a few in there. John Corbett, Zishan mentioned to it, who is looking at how do you bring an indigenous worldview, and very specifically the Cree language, into a programming language. And I think that's going to be an example of one that a lot of people have not thought about. I went to one of the few O'Reilly open source conventions in Europe, OSCON Europe. Happened for many years in Portland, and many of us early open source folks would pilgrimage there all the time. And then they're like, let's do it in Europe. I remember a talk by Rommel, I'll look for the link later, that actually really opened my eyes of saying, and I experienced some of it firsthand with the Drupal community being in Belgium, but then there were Germans in there, and then English was the lingua franca, and there was like communication issues. And I think that language does like change how you think. And I think the like mix down into just English does cause certain things. And I think it's our like in 2023, we should be thinking about ourselves as a global community, which also means multilingual. He says, while putting on an English only conference in Toronto, but
yeah, I was lucky enough to speak at Ruby World in Matsui, Japan a couple of times, which is the home of the creator of Ruby. And the first time I was there as a dumb American, it only then dawned on me that this is the first Japan/Japanese first programming language. And that means a lot. And it goes beyond just national pride, you know. And it goes beyond just like the manuals were first written in Japanese. There's a cultural projection there, and there's clearly, well, I guess the jury is maybe divided on whether language shapes thought or vice versa, but just depends on who you talk to. I believe it does. I want to mention that there is a discount code for people who watch this video. It is AMA 100. Those are zeros. I've been spamming it. It's my fault that it looks like a used car commercial at some points during this, because I want people to see it and know.
I could be twirling a sign if that helps.
Okay, yeah, that's a good idea. Actually, why don't you not twirl a sign, but show the website real quick? Is that good? There's your screen. That's the part where I warn someone before I show their screen to the internet. Here it is.
Awesome. So really pleased. We've got our head of design and creative director Ryan and Bruno did the work on this. I think it's a kind of fun, and we played with it as well. All of our speakers are now announced. The full program is fleshed out. So all of these people will be there in person, except for a special guest, Simon Wardley, coming in on the final day in the morning, streaming to us from the UK. We'll have a couple of workshops on the first day. So just to give you a view of a really awesome set of speakers. So we are doing Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We're starting a little later on Tuesday, kind of a half day. Let yourself get settled if you're traveling in, and come in, do a couple of workshops. New Sphere, super excited to host those folks talking about their worldwide medium for thinking together, a protocol that does some of the same distributed system stuff that Fission works on. Yeah, it's just a really, really great set of things. Do a little click over to the schedule in schedule mode. So Tuesday, Wednesday, and then wrapping up on Thursday.
So all single track, right?
All single track. Yeah, it basically there's already so much going on that exactly that, making people pick between speakers was going to be too intense. We have some flex space in the space that we're in. We're in a very, very cool Paradise Theater in a funky area of Toronto. Then on Wednesday, we've got a party at Lula Lounge, very cool space. And in fact, some of our speakers are going to be doing little mini demos and presentations of some of their more artistic and musical work that you're doing. So anyone in Toronto who's watching, if you can't make it during the day to the conference, you can also just come hang out with us at the party on Wednesday night that I'm super stoked about. Like come ready to learn, come ready to talk to lots of other people, share what you're working on. We'd like to make it a bit of a platform as well. So we'll be reaching out to folks to say, attendees, what are you working on? What do you want to share with this group? That's part of participating, is in fact being part of that. Again, all of the same theme of connecting people so that they can get off their island and share what they're working on.
That is something that worked really well with the Future of Software Development conference too. We asked everyone to have like their thesis coming into the conference. And it's interesting because the last question we have from the chat before we end is, how many combinations are there between 150 people's theses?
Right.
I guess we have to wait to find out. It's probably not just a math problem. It's more complicated than that.
So
and also,
not,
I forgot
not
to
just
mention,
factorial.
I forgot to mention, I was thinking to myself, how would I answer the question about what I'm most excited about? And literally on my desk in front of me is, oh, you can't see it. Oh, here it is. It's this book, Realm of Racket. So if you don't know who that person would be, then you should just scroll through the whole site, look at all the speaker descriptions, and figure it out. You'll probably learn something in that process. Okay, any closing words from anyone here?
I just love the shout out to Racket. Just a shout out to Racket is always good. I like that.
Cool. Okay, great. Well, very much looking forward to this, the online community that hopefully spawns from it and future iterations. And thank you all for taking the time to talk about it.
Thank you, Chad, and thank you, Blue Yard, for being our premium sponsor this year as well. So really appreciate your support in backing things that you think are going to be awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.